Last time we were in here, March of 2023, you told me you were not really cut out to be a legislator and had no interest in working in the Senate.
Yeah, well, that's true, and I actually still kind of feel that way. I mean, look, this is not the most ideal job in the world. Quite frankly, a lot of people probably think it's crazy to want to go into the middle of all that complete dysfunction in Washington and all that divisiveness. I mean, it's broken. I mean, 90% of the people in America think if the place is a mess, they would never go near it. And it's not something that I've aspired to. And I wasn't looking for a new job or a new title, really. But I really felt like somebody has to go down there and try to do something about it. And look, it sounds, trite, but it's a calling. It's like I feel like I have to step up, which is why I ran for governor in the first place, not because I was looking for a job.
So why would Marylanders vote for someone who doesn't really want the job in the first place?
Well, I want to go fix the problem. I'm not somebody that's just looking for another rung up the ladder. I mean, there's a lot of professional politicians that all they care about is their next election. I never cared about that. But I do feel like I have a unique ability to go in there and try to fix things. And I've proven that I've been able to work across the aisle, to work on common sense, bipartisan solutions, and I did that in Annapolis. I also did it in Washington on things like infrastructure, where I brought people together with Democratic and Republican senators and governors and congressmen, and I think it's what's missing in Washington. I think we already sort of showed a better path forward in Annapolis, and so it's almost like being willing to step up and serve, even though it might not be the best job for me. I think I can really represent the people of Maryland.
So Mitch McConnell said that he had a conversation with you. I've heard that Senator Steve Daines from Montana also reached out from the NRSC. What were those conversations like?
Well, look, I got calls from all over the state. I mean, I heard from hundreds of people in Maryland trying to encourage me. They were either saying, please run, we miss you, thank you, you did a great governor. We wish you would run for president, or why don't you run for the Senate? I've been hearing that for the past year since I've been out of office. But I got called from probably 20 different senators. I had one conversation with Mitch McConnell. I had a call from President George W. Bush and others. And people, the general consensus was we desperately lack your kind of leadership in the Senate, that things are off the rails. It's, the two sides and the Democrats and Republicans, and they won't talk to one another, and it's the far right and the far left. And there's nobody that kind of represents, my traditional wing of the Republican Party, who's willing to work across the aisle with Democrats. And we've proven that for 8 years in the bluest state in the country. And people notice that, and they're like, the people are concerned about where both parties are and where the country is and what a mess it is. And they seem to think, and I'm hearing from Democrats and Republicans, who say, we could use a guy like you down there to kind of clean up the mess.
So is it safe to say, do you agree with the characterization that Mitch McConnell recruited you to run for Senate?
Well, look, he's been trying to convince me to do that since Senator Van Hollen's position was up, I guess, years ago. Mm-hmm. But there was one conversation back then, and there was one conversation here. It was one of hundreds of discussions, but none of that really convinced me to run. It's a little bit of a mischaracterization. Yes, I had one conversation with him. It wasn't convincing. It really came down to me making a decision last week that I was just completely fed up, and I could either walk away and watch the train wreck, or I could, I can't keep complaining about how bad things are if I'm not willing to try to be part of the solution.
Maryland hasn't elected a Republican to the U.S. Senate since 1980. I wasn't even born in 1980.
I know.
So why do you think this will be different?
Well, it's very, very difficult, and it's seemingly impossible. I was around in 1980, and I remember Mac Mathias, who's the former senator who served then. It was the last time. It was when Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. It was a huge landslide across the country, even though Reagan didn't win Maryland. Mac Mathias was elected. And he was a good man, and he represented Marylanders across the aisle, and people respected him, whether they were Democrats or Republicans or independents. But yes, it's hard. Donald Trump lost the state of Maryland by 1 million votes, by 33 percentage points, biggest loss in the country. I have to convince people who are not going to vote for him that I can do a good job of representing them in Washington, and it's really hard. But I don't shy away from tough challenges. I mean, I was in an impossible race in 2014. I was 27 points down. They were making fun of me, like the guy has no chance whatsoever. And we pulled off the biggest surprise upset in America. So I know it's difficult. I'm not predicting any victory. I'm going to run like I'm 27 points down. And I'm going to get out there and try to convince people that for the same reason they elected me to be governor and re-elected me to be the governor, second Republican in 247 years. That's even more than waiting 44 years for a senator. That I'm the same guy, and I'm still going to continue to represent them straight down the middle like I always have.
You're going to be on the ballot. If Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for president, you'll be on the ballot at the same time as him. Yeah. Given your outspoken history and your criticism of the former president, are you concerned about Maryland Republicans not choosing you if Donald Trump is on the ballot as well?
Well, look, I've always done really well with Maryland Republicans. In my last two races, I think I had 90% of the Republican vote. I understand that there are some people in the MAGA base of the Republican Party that are frustrated with me because I sometimes stand up and I don't fall in line and I don't take the knee, or sometimes I'll say exactly what I think and I push back against the former president and the current president and both parties. But I think I'm going to go out there and try to earn their support. And if I'm lucky enough to be the nominee after the May primary, then I'm hopeful that they'll get behind me as, you know, the Republican that might have the best chance in 44 years to be elected.
You'll also be on the ballot if you win the primary at the same time when abortion rights in Maryland will be on the ballot. Yesterday during the CNN interview, you said that it was an emotional issue for women and that you would not vote to support a national abortion ban. Do you think that it was a mistake to call it an emotional issue given the fierce pushback you immediately faced?
Well, look, I think that it's vicious attacks from the Democrats, all of which are false. When I ran for governor in 2014, I think they spent $12 million or $15 million attacking me as too extreme for Maryland, and I was going to take away the rights of women, none of which was true. And I promised that I was not going to do anything to roll back protections for the women of Maryland, and that I was the only one in the race that was supportive of over-the-counter birth control. I was not taking any action against abortion, and the voters trusted me and ignored the noise, and I'm very proud of the record that we have, and I think the people of Maryland know me. Now they're back to the same attacks, which just aren't, you know, they came right out of the gate saying something that wasn't true, that I'm going to vote for a national abortion ban. I've said, no, I'm not going to.
Do you believe that abortion is an emotional issue, or is it a healthcare issue?
Maybe that wasn't the best choice of words. What I was actually trying to say was this is really important to women, and I understand that, but here's my position. I'm not black or white. And a lot of people, look, I'm not a person that says we should outlaw abortion. I'm not one that says there should be no restrictions whatsoever. I think most people are somewhere in the middle on that issue, is as divisive as it is. I'm not going to vote for a national abortion ban, but you know, when things are too far in one direction, I'm going to say, hey, I disagree with that.
You did veto legislation that would expand access to broaden who can perform abortions across the state.
Yeah.
Critics say that that is an assault on abortion rights in Maryland.
Well, the critics are wrong. It was a bill that you can go back and read my veto message on the bill. It was not an attempt to take any rights away or to deny access or anything like that. It was a bill to roll back protections for women that we didn't think was safe because they were lowering the standards and allowing non-medical professionals and non-licensed people to perform abortions. And I didn't think that was a smart thing to do. I thought that it was sort of a step backwards to a time when abortions were less safe.
Why did you withhold the $3.5 million for that?
I didn't think it made sense. I was against it and I vetoed the bill.
We saw yesterday, Governor Wes Moore pointed to the fact that as soon as he got into office, he released those funds. Do you expect those type of attacks to continue throughout this race?
I think they will, and I don't think anybody's going to really pay much attention to them because it's the exact same attacks that they've used against me for 10 years. They're trying to paint me into a position that I don't hold, and I think the voters of Maryland know me pretty well by now, and I have a 10-year track record.
Why do you think it's important to have split representation in the Senate for Marylanders?
I just think I'm not really running because I think we need split representation. I'm running because I think both parties are broken and Washington never gets anything done. I'm a guy who likes to get things done, which is one of the reasons why I wasn't that excited about the Senate, because they seemingly never do get anything. But no, I more than anyone in the country, I think, have a record of bipartisanship, where I said in my first inaugural I was going to look for the best ideas, regardless of which side of the aisle they come from. That it was going to be a new era of bipartisan cooperation, and then that's exactly how I governed the whole time. I helped put the bipartisan infrastructure deal together at a national level with Democrats and Republicans, standing up to some folks in my party, but bringing people together. I chaired the group No Labels as the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a centrist organization with equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans who actually try to fix things. Both caucuses, do this politics as usual stuff, like slinging, attacks and, inflammatory rhetoric, and it's the same old stuff that voters are sick and tired of.
I heard it was the immigration issues that really got you to jump in.
Well, I've been toying with the idea for a short period of time, not really very long at all, but I was just getting more and more frustrated. And last Wednesday was when I made the decision. I was watching the debacle in Washington where look, I think Joe Biden has failed on the border. It's a terrible crisis, and I think Republicans and Democrats agree we have to fix it. We've got to secure the border and find a pathway to citizenship and reform of our broken immigration laws. But the Republicans have been talking about it, and so we have an opportunity. Senator Langford was leading an effort. It was a bipartisan effort in the Senate to close the border and get funding for our allies in Israel and Ukraine, and it fell apart because Republicans then changed their position because they were just basically taking a knee and reversing where they were, and that frustrated me. And I was like, instead of going, what a mess, I don't want anything to do with it, I said, I have to go down there and fix this.
So what's your position on this? How do Republicans move forward?
I think I don't know that the whole lot is going to get done on any of these issues between now and November, unfortunately, because it's not just Republicans. It's Democrats and Republicans that are trying to score points against one another. So I had only announced less than an hour, and there were all kinds of crazy attacks from the Democrats, from multiple Democrats, all over, with the same attacks they had before. Republicans are trying to score points against Democrats, and Democrats are trying to score points. I'm repudiating all of that stuff, and I think it's why an overwhelming majority of Marylanders appreciate it. I think that's where they are. I think they're fed up with all of that. But it's not going to get fixed in the middle of an election, but hopefully, if I can get down there and knock some heads together, and maybe we can make a little progress. I can't promise, I'm not a miracle worker, but we were able to get things done in Maryland by working together.
So what do you want to see happen at the border? What's your ideal immigration
we absolutely need to close the border. I think,
fully close it?
I think we ought to close the border. We can't have illegal immigration. We got to stop. We have millions of people pouring across the border. No other country in the world allows that to happen. It's causing massive problems. Democratic mayors in every major city in America are now saying we've got to close the border. They can't handle the crisis. And then we've got to fix the broken immigration system. Right now, it's just anybody can come in. They never get sent back. The process never happens. 2 years, you can come for a court date. It's causing massive problems across the country. I think an overwhelming majority of people, regardless of their party affiliation, think we need to, shut down the border. And I think it's one of the biggest failures of the Biden administration.
How long would you want to see the border closed?
I think the border, in order to have
Keep it
a
closed?
functioning democracy, we have to have a secure border. That doesn't mean no one can come through the immigration process, but we can't just let people come across the border.
I want to talk to you about guns just based on what we saw yesterday in Kansas City, another incident, another mass shooting. What can Congress do to address this?
Well, it's something that I've been passionate about for a long time, for decades, and I've, again, kind of standing up to some people in my party, I've taken some actions that they weren't too happy with. But, I forever have said we need to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and the mentally ill, and we still can protect the rights of law-abiding citizens with their Second Amendment rights and have a balance. I think we need universal background checks instantly, and so many of these people would not have access to guns. What we did in Maryland, we put way more money into mental health counseling and drug treatment and trying to do something about stopping the illegal guns and the people who are shooting people with the illegal guns. So Maryland has some of the toughest gun laws in America, but it doesn't stop the violence because criminals don't follow gun laws. Only law-abiding citizens do. So, city, for example, crime is out of control. I pushed for tougher sentencing for people who commit a felony with a handgun, tougher mandatory sentences for repeat violent offenders, all of which the Democrats were opposing. About 80 or 90% of the people in Maryland agree with my policy. So it's not just gun legislation. I signed a bump stock law. I signed a red flag law after the Annapolis Capitol shooting. I have a moderate reasoned position where I understand that we've got to protect people's rights while also stopping the gun violence. And there are many parts to it, but what happens in Congress is Democrats only talk about more gun control, which hasn't worked in Maryland, where we have the toughest, and Republicans only talk about we can't have any restrictions. And it's a much more complicated problem, and we have to sit down and talk to one another and find a solution because it's a terrible cancer on America.
So you say you support universal background checks for weapons.
Yeah, always have.
You vetoed a bill in Maryland that would require background checks for the sale of rifle and shotguns.
Well, look, I was while that was happening, pushing for tougher sentences for gun crimes, commission of a felony with a gun, people that repeatedly shoot people that are being let back on the street after 13 arrests or 3 convictions, nobody ever being held accountable. The legislature passed a bill about hunting rifles instead of addressing the illegal handguns that everybody's being shot with in the city of Baltimore. And it was cynical. It had nothing to do with gun control. And I don't know that anyone has ever been shot in Baltimore City with a hunting rifle. But they wouldn't fix the real problem, and they were just trying to throw up an issue. People that are using hunting rifles pretty much are already registering those guns for the most part, and that's not where all the murders and the violent crime is taking place.
What sets you apart from your Republican challenger in this primary?
I don't know all of the challengers, but I know there are 7 of them, and I just think I'm a guy that the people of Maryland know where I stand and that they know I'm able to win elections as the second Republican to win re-election in 246 years and the second one to be elected in 50 years. And I think they know where I stand on every issue. So I'm sure a lot of folks out there, we're probably going to disagree on things. I'm not taking anything for granted. I don't expect any coronation, not for the Democrats. I mean, I think they thought this race was over in May. We're going to give them the toughest fight of their life.
When it comes to the NRSC, did they try and convince you to run to get the Democrats to spend money in a state that they otherwise wouldn't have?
Well, I never would. I don't want to be, cannon fodder for anybody. I mean, I've got a lot of things going on in my life. I wouldn't waste my time just to go help, make the Democrats spend money in some other state. I'm only running because I think I can make a difference. And as big of a challenge as it is, and look, I could walk away and say, I was a successful governor and people think I did a good job and I could be very content. This is a big risk. I'm pushing in all my political capital for a race that, seemingly impossible that most people don't think. In the middle of a crazy election, it had nothing to do with any other state. It was just my gut feeling that I needed to step up and try to do something.